Hello lovelies. It would be cheap of me to do another top 10 video so soon after the other one, so I'll leave that for later in the week. For now, we are looking at a pair of Napoleonic era RPGs, Duty and Honor and Beat to Quarters. So these are both set in the Napoleonic era, which cross-pollinates with the Regency era, 1803 to 1815. Jane Austen, is of the same era. The brains behind the 1810 Clerkenwell diamond robbery. It's the time of Sharp's rifles, if you want to see something that Sean Bean doesn't die in, or Master and Commander for Beat to Quarters, if you want to see Russell Crowe before he was possessed by the disembodied spirit of Oliver Reed after Gladiator and slowly began turning into him. Now, the Napoleonic era goes weirdly relatively underserved in role-playing, despite being one of the main genesis points for RPGs. People role-playing stuff out before they actually played out the battles to determine what happened. So it's a little odd that there isn't much out there in the Napoleonic era, especially considering that there are Napoleonic era reenactors and so on. I've known a few in the past. There's basically this and Flintlock, which is a skirmish game in a sort of fantasy Napoleonic era where the English are orcs, and the French, I think, are elves, and the Spanish are dark elves. I think that's right. You can get Flintlock still online, but it is a war game. But you could combine the two to make a decent RPG, and maybe I'll get around to doing some sort of semi-retro clone thing, combining the two in my own way at some point. I don't know. It strikes me as an interesting exercise. But that's about it. Now, this is military role-playing, which can be quite restrictive, but it can also be a godsend for games masters, as you can give the players orders from on high as part of the war or whatever, that this is what you have to do, which gets rid of the whole problem of the kind of instigating event that you might otherwise have in a role-playing game. You don't meet a shady guy in a tavern who whispers to you of hidden treasures. No, you march forth on the King's Shilling to take on old Boney. The game is run using a deck of playing cards, so it's worth finding a couple of nice sets, maybe some Napoleonic themed sets or something, if you intend to play a lot. I think they normally have a player deck and a GM deck, but I don't see the harm in everyone having their own deck. Characters are defined by what are called measures. That is guts, discipline, influence, and charm. And these typically range from 1 to 5, with 6+ being very rare and kind of reserved for experienced characters or very powerful and influential NPCs. So those are your statistics, basically, but they're quite abstract. They don't necessarily have to be reflected in your character's physique or anything else. It's basically your character's main character syndrome. So yeah, these typically range from 1 to 5, 6+ being very rare. You are also defined by your reputations, which is very fitting for the era, your loyalties to various groups and people, and the favours that you might be owed from various people and institutions. Your character is then further defined by their skills, which typically run the same 1 to 5 that measures do. You don't typically test your measures so much as you test your skills. Your character is further defined by their experiences, which can be from their pre-military life or from their military life, or you might be able to negotiate with your games master for some other things. So your character's defined by their backgrounds, their experiences. You further define not so much in game statistic terms, but otherwise, what nationality, what religion, what regiment, and so on you might be a part of. Your character's further defined by traits, which are special personal exceptions that NPCs and other characters might not actually have, and these give you bonuses in certain conditions or alter certain things about your character. Now, as a military game, you need the right mix of rank and file characters and officers, and there's a handy little table back in the character creation section for getting the right composition for your game group. For example, with 4 players, you might have 2 privates, a sergeant, and a lieutenant. So you've got commissioned officer, non-commissioned officer, and a couple of people for them to order around, which makes for a reasonable mix. It's actually probably more fun playing the rank and file than it is playing an officer, because the rank and file get their hands dirty. They get out there and they do things, and the final responsibility for everything rests on the officers in sort of unit engagement, skirmishes, that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily there's a lot of pressure on you if you're playing the officer, which you might not want to engage in necessarily. So far as the system goes, you take the skill being used, its level, add any other effects, traits, equipment, and other bonuses to provide a final number, and that's how many cards you get to draw. Other people can help you, but you can only ever get a maximum of 3 extra cards from people helping you. The Games Master then turns over a card of fate, and that is the difficulty that you are testing against. Anything that is of the same suit as the card of fate is 1 success. Anything that is the same number as the card of fate is a critical success, and if you draw the exact same card, it's a perfect success. Jokers are wild, so you can substitute them in for any other card that you want, and anything else you draw is a failure. So let's say we had 5 cards to draw, right? The card of fate is the 8 of diamonds. So because this would be separate decks and we want the chance of drawing the same card, okay, and we draw 4 cards. Alright, so we have 2 cards of the same suit, so 2 normal successes. We don't have any of the same number, and anything else is a failure. So that gives us 2 successes, right? And let us say, for sake of argument, that you were up against something that also drew 4 cards. So they would then draw. Okay, so those are failures. The 10 of hearts is also a failure, but we drew the same number exactly. So the enemy's got a perfect success. So the enemy beats you. They have perfect success, and they have more perfect successes than you do. So you go down. Perfect, compare. Critical, compare. Successes, compare. And whoever gets the most at the highest level is the one that wins the challenge. Your health, your reputation, your morale as a company, or your wealth can all end up wounded in certain contests, with wound states being described as normal, injured, maimed, or dead. And yes, a reputational death is pretty damn serious. How badly hurt you are depends on the best draw that the enemy got. So a success injures you, a critical success maims you, and a perfect success kills you. So our player wouldn't have gotten off particularly well on that previous draw. Yeah, and that could be applied to anything. So you could be ruined by losing all your wealth. You could become a social outcast by losing all your reputation in various degrees. Your unit could abandon you apart from the other PCs if your morale all went, and so on. Missions in the game, so missions, quests, whatever you want to call them, they're kind of negotiable, with players helping to determine what challenges they'd like to undertake in order to complete the mission with the Games Master. So it might be that, you know, you want to, or your mission is to convey cargo from one place to another if you're playing Beta Quarters, in which case you would perhaps want to explore a desert island, outrun a French warship, weather a storm, and avoid being shipwrecked, maybe, depending on the skills that your characters had. So that gives you your main challenges. Maybe the Games Master says, okay, that last one, no, I want you to engage with a French ship, maybe the same one that's been following you, right? So yeah, you negotiate back and forth, but there is the idea of plenty of player buy-in, even though this isn't really a narrative game per se. There are narrative elements to it. Players can also come up with their own personal or group missions that they want to undertake within certain guidelines and subject to Games Master approval. So alongside everything there that might be going on, maybe one of the characters sets a personal goal of improving one of their measures by exercise or hardiness or personal epiphany or whatever else. And the GM and the player will negotiate for the personal missions as well. So everyone has two goals at a session, basically. Their own personal goal and the group mission. Being a military game, skirmishes or ship-to-ship battles will take place on occasion, though these don't have to be fights. Like the officers attending a ball could be such an occasion, or a parade before a very critical outranking officer, or even an infiltration could be a skirmish. Basically, a skirmish is any group action that involves less than 50 people or so. To complete skirmishes or battles, each player completes a task, perhaps with bonuses from their commander's orders, so they make their own tests individually. You tally the results. The successes provide bonuses to the commander, or penalties if you fail, and then the commander makes an overall test for everything combined, and that determines the final overall outcome. So everyone can do their little bit and be involved and play to their strengths, and that all contributes towards the final thing. Keeping in mind that the player characters, of course, are hinges of the ages, and the rank and file extra troops aren't. They might provide a numerical advantage or something. You know, there's rules for that. There are more advanced skirmish rules, but everything really hinges around the player characters and their actions. So it does center on the heroes, and this is quite a good way of dealing with battles and ship-to-ship actions and things. It means everyone can contribute, and that can tip the balance one way or another. The advanced skirmish rules allow for random red shirts to be killed instead of the characters, and for larger battles to take place. You'll also find rules for artillery, and in beta quarters for ship-to-ship combat. Artillery is utterly beastly and quite inhumane. So yeah, beta quarters is the naval version, and would make quite a good piracy campaign tool as well. The characters in beta quarters are broadly compatible, work pretty much the same way, but obviously it's centered around a ship's company and the ship itself rather than a military unit, and there's much more scope perhaps for individual action than there might be in Duty and Honor. It has rules for creating the NPC complement of essential crew for positions that aren't filled by characters, including the captain, though a character might eventually rise to such a rank. And the ships themselves are treated almost as characters, with sets of statistics and some personalization to make them a bit more individual. Ships can take multiple injuries to their various parts, crew, guns, rigging and hull, and running out of damage boxes in any of these spells disaster. And again, this is a system you could overlay on other systems. You just get the players to do their actions, then switch systems and count their action's success or failure as bonuses to what's done at the ship level or the skirmish level. That would work quite well. Ship encounters resolve similarly to skirmishes in Duty and Honor. Yeah, the same way. Player successes or failures provides bonuses or penalties to the kind of ship level action. Now, quite apart from that, both books contain the occasional historical document and a great deal of useful information should you decide to set any game in the Napoleonic era, or a fantasy or alternate history version of both. And like I said, this could be easily used to convert Flintlock into an RPG, or to be used as a rules alternative for skirmish engagements in any other games. Like I said, it is a shame that it is an underserved area, given that it was so important and key to the development of RPGs. And for my money, Duty and Honor and Beta Quarters are some of the better games out there for this sort of thing. Easily converted also if you wanted to do even modern military or Victorian or anything else. It's not going to be that difficult to convert these for military campaigns of any stripe that you care to mention, really. But obviously this supports Napoleonic era. This isn't really a review, as this is kind of a flashback to these games. When were they actually copyrighted? 2008. This is the second printing of the game from 2009. So I guess it's old enough that this is a know your role rather than a review. You can still get the books. I think Indie Press Revolution might have them. Otherwise, you can get them at Drive-Thru. There's not much in the way of supplementary material. There's an 1809 miscellany and an 1810 of the same. That's a variety of NPCs, missions, additional material, but it's not necessary. But these are worth picking up, and they're not too expensive if you're curious about the Napoleonic era or military gaming, military role-playing games. So, despite it being a know your role, let's give these some scoring, shall we? Style-wise, they're very dry, but that reflects the type of gaming it's trying to appeal to. It's very much overwhelmingly about the rules and the history, and that's either going to appeal to you or not, as the case may be. but it's not particularly characterful or inspiring in the writing. But you know, it's history. What you're going to do? In terms of artwork, it's pretty sparse and historical. When you do have artwork like these characters, that is very nice. I quite like and enjoy the artwork for the various character examples and the occasional officer and so on. That is shown. Our sample characters here. Yeah, it's line art, it's black and white, but you know, that's fine. So presentation wise, I can't really give them more than a 3 because it is so minimalist, and because it is so dry. It's not necessarily hugely inspiring, but it doesn't have to be. In terms of substance, there's plenty here. There's a lot more to learn about the Napoleonic era, but you know, there's history books and books about all the different units and so on online. Yeah, illustrated guides to uniforms and so on. So there's plenty out there if you need it. But as basic primers, these are very good indeed. Yeah, that's a good way to dip your toe into the Napoleonic era. So I would give them a high 4 out of 5 for substance, both of them. If you're playing on any kind of naval or pirate campaign, Beta Quarters is very useful as a reference. So that's 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5. I would suggest getting both books because they complement each other. Quick reminder on my reviews, 3 is average. Right, so 3.5 is better than average. That means good. I think this is something of a specialist interest for a lot of people. But if you're at all interested in that, then these 2 games are very good buys. Zang. I have a woefully undersubscribed subreddit, so please do me a favour. If you're a Redditor, head on over to r/postmortem studios and talk about anything related to any of my shenanigans. Peace.
Well, I look at it myself as the beginning, really, of an exploration. That's the reason we're exploring. You don't know what you'll run into on an exploration. What the sky looks like, what the stars look like. Do they still twinkle, or are they a steady light when you get outside the atmosphere?